Welcome back to the Explainer, folks. Today, we're diving into a topic that might honestly completely change how you view one of nature's most misunderstood creatures. We're going to explore the surprising and frankly fascinating economics of beaver management. Let's jump right in and see how an animal that's so often written off as just a nuisance pest is actually right at the center of this huge intersection between infrastructure, climate resilience, and some really smart financial strategy. I know it sounds a bit crazy, right? But what if our greatest ally against climate change literally has buck teeth and a flat tail? For decades, so many communities have basically just viewed beavers as annoying pests, those animals that flood out our roads and chew down our favorite trees. But if we take a step back, reframe our thinking, and actually look at the data, treating beavers as vital ecosystem engineers unlocks just massive, long-term value, not just for our environment, but for our wallets too. All right, let's get into Section 1, Nature's Ultimate Ecosystem Engineers. So, when beavers build a dam out of branches, mud, and stones, they essentially put the brakes on fast-moving streams. What this does is create these incredibly deep, stable backwater ponds. And by raising the local water table, they physically push surface water deep down into the groundwater system. They are, for all intents and purposes, building a highly efficient natural storage tank that completely re-wets the entire surrounding landscape. And the environmental payoff of that whole process? It is absolutely staggering. Get this, 14. Researchers have actually found that the sediments built up in these beaver-created wetlands contain up to 14 times more inorganic carbon and 8 times more organic carbon than nearby unmanaged forest soils. Because beavers physically change how carbon is stored by stocking up dead wood and trapping sediment, these wetlands become incredibly powerful, long-lasting carbon sinks. As long as that dam stays intact, all that carbon stays locked away for decades. Moving right along to Section 2, Fire breaks and Climate Buffers. Now, the massive ecological value of these ponds really steps into the spotlight when we talk about extreme weather. Because of that slow-release water storage we just talked about, the groundwater recharges, keeping the surrounding vegetation moist all year round. This turns these areas into phenomenal natural drought buffers. When streams totally dry out, beaver ponds hold on to their water, creating critical lifelines for local wildlife. Plus, they generate these cool microclimates, little pockets of humidity that protect sensitive species when heat waves hit. And if a disaster does strike, those permanently wet soils mean plant life bounces back incredibly fast, which stabilizes the soil and stops erosion in its tracks. And that actually brings us to a phenomenon so striking it has its own name, the green firebreak effect. During these severe mega fires we keep seeing, upland forests might be completely incinerated to ash, but stream segments with active beaver colonies, they stay vibrantly green. They literally resist burning. These wetlands act as protective rings. And even after the fire passes, they trap all the toxic ash and sediment that washes down the slopes, acting as natural filtration buffers that protect our downstream drinking water supplies. So with all that good stuff, why the tension? Let's look at Section 3, the cost of conflict. The root of the issue here is pretty simple. Beavers just do not care about our infrastructure. They hear the sound of running water, say rushing through a road culvert, and their biological instinct screams at them to plug it up. And that drive frequently leads to flooded roads, submerged hiking trails, and real damage to human property. This clash between their natural habit of building wetlands and our need for dry land is the core of the whole conflict. Now, historically, our go-to management style has been pretty harsh, lethal control and physically ripping out the dams. But the consequence of that approach is the immediate loss of all those amazing wetland biodiversity and climate benefits we just talked about. And honestly, it's just a temporary fix. It's a Band-Aid. New beavers will eventually find that prime real estate, move right back in, and the whole flooding cycle starts over from scratch. We end up paying this massive ecological cost for zero long-term gain. And the financial cost of that Band-Aid approach, it is eye-watering. Take a look at this number. Over $3.1 million. That is the amount spent every single year by just 48 municipalities and a few park districts up in Alberta, Canada, just to fight this endless recurring battle. Millions of dollars spent bringing in heavy machinery, tearing out dams, and repairing washed-out culverts year after year with zero long-term resolution. Which perfectly tees up Section 4, Enter the Pond Leveler. So what's the fix? Well, a pond leveler is beautifully simple. It's basically just a pipe system installed directly through an existing beaver dam. You decide on the maximum water level you can tolerate before your road floods, and you set the pipe at that height. Whenever the pond rises above that mark, the water automatically flows into the pipe and safely drains downstream. The beavers get to keep their deep pond, and we get to keep our dry roads. It flawlessly balances human infrastructure with beaver habitat. And the best part? We are not talking about some million-dollar high-tech engineering marvel here. Installing one of these levelers really just requires some manual labor, wading into a pond with some wire fencing, and laying down heavy-duty plastic piping. It is a highly practical, incredibly accessible piece of technology that can be deployed almost anywhere beavers and human infrastructure collide. Let's demystify the tech for a second and look at the steps. Step 1, you sink a caged intake deep into the pond. That cage is absolutely crucial, by the way, because it keeps the beavers far enough away from the intake pipe that they can't hear or feel the water flowing, so they don't even try to plug it. Step 2, you just run the pipe right through the dam. Step 3, set your desired water height. And Step 4, just occasionally monitor it for debris. That's the whole shebang. A properly installed device needs very little upkeep. In fact, that same study in Alberta found that when they tweaked the design for shallower streams, using what they called a mini leveler, some of these sites required absolutely zero maintenance for years. All right, let's crunch the numbers in Section 5, comparing the real costs. When we actually put these strategies side by side, the math is undeniable. Traditional management, like fixing a road that just washed out, can easily cost upwards of $4,900 for a single incident. Multiply that out, and you hit that massive $3.1 million provincial price tag. But for a pond leveler, the annualized cost, and that includes materials, the initial labor, and the ongoing monitoring, is just $141 to $190 per site. You are literally replacing a multi-thousand-dollar, highly destructive emergency with a predictable, sub-$200 maintenance routine. And hey, these financial wins aren't just isolated to one specific province. Other jurisdictions are seeing the exact same thing. The Virginia Department of Transportation installed similar flow devices, branded numbers, and calculated their return on investment. They saw a massive 8.37 to 1 ROI. That means for every single dollar they spent putting in and maintaining these non-lethal devices, they saved over $8 in road repairs and traditional trapping costs. It's an absolute game changer. To really drive this point home, let's look back at Alberta. By simply maintaining 12 problem sites with pond levelers, instead of constantly ripping out the dams, the provincial park saved nearly $180,000 over a 7-year period. And again, that's just 12 sites. Imagine the sheer scale of the savings if we rolled this out to every recurring human-beaver conflict zone out there. Choosing coexistence over conflict is quite simply a brilliant financial strategy. So I want to leave you with this final thought. Are we finally ready to stop fighting nature's engineers and actually start working with them? Based on the data we walked through today, shifting from endless conflict to smart coexistence isn't just about hugging trees or saving an animal. It is about unlocking massive economic savings, storing tons of carbon, and building profound drought and wildfire resilience directly into our landscapes. The tools are incredibly simple, the math makes total sense, and the long-term benefits are just undeniable. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I really hope this leaves you looking at that next beaver pond in a whole new light.